Welcome to Fresh Off the Boat. I'm delighted to be interviewing Tanmay Gupta, a student I've known since 2016, 17, and then he applied to college, made it to UChicago. He's completed 2 years. Obviously, this last quarter was completely online for him, and it's interesting the amount of kind of whirlwind sort of has hit the higher education system. So, welcome in midst of all of this, Tanmay. I'd want you to
Thank you for
introduce
having me.
yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we'll roll with my first question.
Sure. So, my name is Tanmay Gupta. I just finished my second year at UChicago. I am from Gurgaon. I went to the Sri Ram School at Ravali, and I've been working with Edbrand since class 11, I think. And yeah, I'm glad to be on here.
Yeah, so welcome on our podcast, actually. So, the few things students really want to know about U Chicago is about its
Mhm.
rigor and academic schedule and how much of it is really true. But how was it like settling in general, not just
Mhm.
academically, but otherwise once you enrolled in 2018?
Yeah. I mean, I think the experience is it's a mixed bag. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's a good you get a lot of independence. It's a good change, but obviously there are many challenges that come with it. And I mean, Chicago itself, I think one specific thing about that they talk about a lot while you're moving in and people experience is that you're living in a big city. And So I guess the challenges of moving in there are slightly different to what it might be in, say, a college town or something. But overall, I think my experience of moving in was not too bad. I got to meet a lot of people, and we had quite a long orientation because we had 1 week for international students and then 1 week which was the regular orientation. It was a 2 week kind of transition process, which was pretty long, but I guess the time made it more smooth.
Sure. So after all the fun and games ended, and the academic
Yeah.
advising and choosing
Mhm.
classes, how does the quarter system work at U Chicago,
Mhm.
and what is that you didn't expect in terms of the pace of academics, and
Mhm.
how did you cope with just the workload, which is what U Chicago is really well known for, kind of
Yeah.
torturing students with.
Yeah. So as for the quarter system, we have a pretty similar quarter system to schools like Northwestern and Stanford. So we have 3 quarters in a year. I mean, there are 4 quarters, but 3 quarters are like mandatory in terms of being there. So you have autumn quarter, which is from October to December. Then you have a winter quarter from January to March, and then you have spring quarter from uh, end March, April to June. So you will be there for 3 quarters, and then you have like an optional summer quarter where you can take extra classes. And each quarter is 10 weeks, which actually they've announced now that from next year or from 2021 fall, they'll actually be changing around their schedule a bit. So they'll instead of 10 weeks, the quarters will be 9 weeks, and it'll get over like by the starting of June. So that's going to change from the year after this one. Uh, So yeah, so the quarter system also means that you're going to be taking 3 terms of classes every year instead of two, as it is in most places, and it is pretty fast paced. 10 weeks, and it's all like you finish an entire class with midterms and finals all in 10 weeks. Uh, but I guess the one thing that uh, gives you some kind of room is that you don't take as many classes as you would in a semester and per quarter. You would take generally you take about 4 classes, but you can overload and take five, but you don't take more than that as people in semester schools might. But yeah, so as for U Chicago's pace and rigor, it definitely is because of the quarter system and because of how their academics generally works. It's pretty fast. It feels like quarters go by without you realizing it. But I think it's not structured in a way that it becomes unmanageable or impossible to do as unlike what some people think. And it's not something I would particularly be concerned about or scared of, but it's definitely pretty quick.
Sure. So it definitely seems that you end up doing a lot more and a lot quicker. In a way, you also get a sense of what you like, what you don't like academically.
Mhm.
Sort of you make those decisions, many
Yeah.
more such decisions in a year. So when you started making those choices, I know you're headed towards thinking of math, declaring math as a
Mhm.
major, and you've done enough economics to even
Yeah.
consider that. But did you go and decided? What are the interesting
Mhm.
classes you took which steered you in a certain direction?
Mhm. So for me, actually, I went in thinking completely different. Like when I was applying, I was thinking of doing something like in the area of political science or policy, and I always was interested in math, so I wanted to do it in some way. But I was kind of very interested in those things as well, and I still am interested, but I don't think I want to kind of pursue it as a major now. Uh, what changed my mind, I guess, was that so I think one good thing that UChicago has, I'm not sure, like I'm sure other schools has it as well, but I'm not sure exactly in what way. But one good thing that they have is that for the introductory kind of requirement classes, they have different like levels of different classes. You can still take uh, some pretty challenging and rewarding classes in things like calculus, uh, which kind of give you more of an insight into how math academically works. So I took this class first year. This was this like year-long sequence called honors calculus. So uh, that was kind of a more theoretical and higher level version of the regular calculus classes that a first year would take. And the purpose of that class was kind of to bridge the gap between like high school math and college math, and it went really deep into math because it went into like a lot of uh, a lot of things I did second year as well, and a lot of things people do second, third, fourth years. Uh, Students already get exposure to that first year as part of the sequence. A lot of really theoretical stuff, a lot of kind of researchy stuff in math. Uh, and for me, the turning point was this class because I was always, as I said, I was always interested in math, but I never knew whether I wanted to study it properly in college or not. But this class kind of made me sure that I wanted to study it because I really found the kind of theoretical stuff and the more higher level stuff very interesting.
Sure. So you ended up doing that for the full year, and then
Mhm.
in your second year, how does that build up on? Like, what are the different math courses did
Mhm.
you take, and do you see some applied sort of
Mhm.
work coming through? Because I remember during high school you were interested in data analytics and
Yeah, yeah.
combining political science and political
Mhm.
data and analyzing it for academic research at that level.
Mhm.
So, did you find a way to think of math in terms of applications also?
So I would kind of separate like math and application. So if you go into like a math major in college, then as part of that major, you won't be seeing any applications, or you won't be working with things like data and such. But uh, the math major, like I think at any school or in any system, will give you a lot of room to do other things with it. So a lot of people I know who study math, they're doing like CS with it, they're doing econ with it, like I am as well. They're doing statistics with it. So there are very few people who are, well, not very few, but there are relatively few people who are just studying pure math and nothing else because uh, most people aren't sure about the extent to which they want to go into pure math and whether they want to stay in it after college as well. There are some people who are very sure about wanting to go into like grad school for math, doing PhD in math, and then just like entering academia for pure math. So those people typically just stay with the pure math classes, but most people I would say have something else, something more applied that they're studying with pure math. But as part of the pure math program itself, there's not much.
Got it.
The program itself won't introduce you to applied things, but uh, they know that students often want to study other things with it, and there's a
So,
lot
what are
of.
the topics you ended up doing in the second year in math?
Mhm. So math majors generally work. So first year you will be doing calculus, you'll be doing possibly linear algebra first year, and but the good thing for me was that they introduced this honors calculus sequence, which is it's not really calculus. I mean, it's more like analysis, which is what you do second year. It's like an introduction to that. So first year is typically calculus, linear algebra. Second year you will probably do something like real analysis, which is I guess one of the more well-known and notorious kind of classes that every math major will do basically everywhere in the world. Then you will have some, I think, second or third year again, you'll do some kind of abstract algebra. And beyond that, you'll do things like topology and geometry, but those are generally more. structured through electives and all. But the requirements generally like calculus, linear algebra,
Got it.
analysis, and abstract algebra.
Super. So you mentioned that you're kind of considering the econ sort of track as well.
Mhm.
Uh, so typically, where do you see a cusp between econ and math, and what did your interests sort of shape up?
Mhm. So I think at least at UChicago, there are like I think they offer four different tracks in econ. So they offer one or like two regular tracks, and there are some minor differences, but two regular academic economics tracks. They have one that's more kind of geared towards business and people who want to possibly go into business or finance or like business school after college. And there's one that they introduced, I think, just a couple years ago, which is economics with the specialization in data science, which is also what people who really want to go into data science uh, might want to kind of check out. But as for me, as of now, like I'm not sure, but I think one possibility for me after graduating is to uh, do a PhD in economics, which is something I've kind of always been thinking about. I'm still not sure about it, but that's one thing I'm seriously considering. And if you want to go into graduate level work in economics, then having a lot of background with pure math is very important. So I think that's the number one case in which you would want to study a lot of pure math. And people, in fact, like people say that if you want to go into grad school in economics, studying economics as an undergrad isn't even that important. What's more important is studying a lot of math and statistics and getting that kind of theoretical grasp on these things because a graduate level work in economics really turns a lot on this kind of knowledge. And I mean, that's not the reason that I took up pure math. I was very interested in it too. Uh, but it aligns well with what I want to do after
Very
college.
interesting. So, I mean, very often students who meet us, we sort of talk about behavioral economics and
Mhm.
also generally the macros and development economics. And but the reality of any econ degree is a lot of math. So, I think it's
Yeah.
good
So
to
I think,
clarify
yeah.
that.
So if you want to go into like research and graduate school, I mean, all these other areas are things you'll be focusing on uh, in your research, definitely. But I think one major prerequisite is that you should be very comfortable with theoretical math and statistics and stuff. So as an undergrad, at least based on whatever limited knowledge I have right now, those kind of skills are the best to pick up because you can branch out into specific streams of economics later on as well, but you can't really build that solid base in math if you don't as an undergrad.
Sure. So, of course, math has, it's not just looking at equations and figuring things out, but there's a lot of computer science also in it. So, do you
Mhm.
also learn MATLAB and something and other
Uh,
softwares?
to some extent. So, like, I wouldn't say, at least at least in my experience till now with math, there hasn't been a lot of like computation or like numerical methods and all involved in it so far. But in economics, for example, we've in economics, so I took a class in probability this quarter. And so in those, we kind of combined a lot of what you had done in math and calculus and algebra, analysis, things like that. You would use those, and then you would also use numerical methods. You would use like, as you said, MATLAB, Mathematica. You would use tools like that. So while I'm sure there are some applications of these programs and these methods in pure math itself, the way that in my experience I've used them is that in classes like statistics and economics, you often combine what you learn in pure math and these kind of programming and computational methods.
Great. Switching gears to other electives that you might have sort
Mhm.
of sampled and also different seminar style classes. Given that you had interest in political science, did you end up choosing some of those courses related to things that interested you?
Mhm.
And what were those?
Uh, yeah, so at UChicago, we have this very extensive core th- that we have to do. So there's a lot of classes in different areas like the humanities, social sciences that you have to that every student has to do. And uh, and these classes aren't just so. I mean, they aren't just like check the box kind of classes. I mean, they are very like well designed, and a lot of their kind of core classes are very well known as well. So people uh, are very sought after. Uh, and so I've tried to take those according to what I'm interested in. I haven't had too much time yet to explore like electives completely outside the realm of what I'm kind of focusing on, but that's mainly because I've got a lot of exposure to those through these core classes. And so, two things or three things. So we have to finish as part of the core. We have this humanities requirement where they have a bunch of specially designed classes for the requirement. So the class I took was called philosophical perspectives. So it was like an introduction to philosophy and like, I mean, Western philosophy in particular, and the just the big people. Like so the first quarter, we focused on uh, the ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and stuff. Then we moved on to people like Hume and Kant, and I guess the more contemporary thinkers. And this was really my first introduction to kind of philosophy and like real philosophical texts. Like obviously, I read up or I was slightly interested in this before, but I never had any experience actually reading these authors and their whatever the actual texts from which these ideas come. And this class really gave exposure, uh, like to me in that area, and like it's something through this class I developed an interest in philosophy. Like I don't know to what extent I'm going to do it or if I'll even take any more classes, but it's something that I'm definitely now kind of
Very
more interested
interesting.
in
So,
reading about and understanding,
definitely.
exploring.
So, do you think that that whole life of the mind sort of spirit at UChicago and the picture a lot of
Mhm.
reviewers sort of
Yeah.
paint about the busy UChicago or overburdened UChicago student? Is it reality or it's just like any other place where it's up to you how much
Uh,
you take on?
I think it's partly true, partly not. I mean, they definitely pride themselves a lot on these very uh, kind of fundamental things that they go into, like philosophy. Like I think e- every student who graduates from U Chicago would have read like Plato or something, and so there are these very like standard things that they make everyone do, and like it's very theoretical, very like kind of fundamental things in these areas. Uh, Such as reading these texts and like even their introductory math sequences will go into a bit of like theory beyond what you would see in a kind of first year calculus class. So they have a large focus on these like very theoretical and fundamental things in areas. So in that sense, yeah, that's something that they want to kind of give to every student. And so in that sense, the idea of the life of the mind and the super theoretical way things go is true. But obviously, it's also an image they try and craft with the students in the
Got it.
world. And so
Fascinating. Yeah. So, how do
it
you,
can
or
be
how,
just
go ahead.
sorry, it can be a bit exaggerated at times, but it definitely is. Like if you're interested in that kind of stuff, then it definitely is a good place to be.
So, I know you were a very busy student in high school with so many activities, starting new initiatives, and all of that. What kept you busy outside studying
Mhm.
at UChicago, and what are the things
So.
that you
Mhm.
felt you wish you had more time for?
Yeah. So I've done a few things, but I think like one thing that changed about what I was doing, what I was interested in when I went to college was that I now spend more time on academics than I did in school. I mean, so in school my time was I think pretty evenly divided between academics and things outside academics, but I think now it's skewed more towards academics over the past few years because I guess that's just how my interests have shaped up. But outside class, I've been involved in. So one thing I've been involved in throughout my 2 years is the month that we have there. So our month conference, Choman we call it, and uh, we have the conference once a year, but throughout the year we have different activities and things we're doing. So I've been involved with that club throughout my 2 years, and I will continue my involvement next year as well. Uh, And then, other than that, I've been involved in second year at least. I researched at this research center at the economics department. So this professor has this large kind of team in this center which works a lot and works a lot to help him in his research. And I've been a
What
research
is the
assistant
field?
there.
What is the field of
This is
research that the
economics.
professor within economics is the particular?
So within economics, so it's 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 applied microeconomics, which is what's very popular and like it's like I would say if undergrads are researching, that's most likely what they'll be researching in applied micro. So it's a lot of experimental economics and kind of designing these experiments and working a lot with data and such. So uh, I've been involved with them for a good part of my second year, and I'm also actually continuing working with them over the summer now. Uh, so that has been a very good kind of part of
Fascinating.
my
So,
second year.
if you look at the world today, I mean, the economics and the stock markets and all kinds of
Mhm.
markets actually
Yeah.
don't seem to be making sense. What is your overall take, as, or what you hear from professors? Where where is the world economy headed?
Mhm.
It's a very broad
So I
question.
think,
But go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, I'm no expert in this or qualified to
Yeah.
comment on this, but I mean, so this quarter I actually had a macroeconomics class in which we obviously like we did the standard things, but it would be wrong to finish a macroeconomics class without discussing the world economy right now. So we often kind of the professor often discussed how the economy is right now and where based on previous trends where he thinks that it could be headed. And I think one interesting thing that I took away from it, and I tell everyone when this topic comes up, is that I think if you look at historical trends of kind of like national income and so forth, after World War II, like especially in European countries like Italy, Germany, and such, there was a huge dip, but it kind of it was on the it found its way to the right path in a few years, and then you were almost back to normal in a few years. So what my professor claims is that uh, even after these huge shocks, like we'll see now to the global economy, I mean, economies kind of have a way of finding themselves back on the right path. So it'll just be a few years before they kind of bounce back. I mean, that isn't to say that, I mean, there will be countries and economies that are hurt more than others, and there will certainly be like a lot of economic kind of turmoil in the world. But we kind of looked at some trends that show that even after all the devastation caused by the Second World War, like a lot of European economies kind of just in a few years found their way back to their original path.
It's good to know that economists are also optimists.
I mean, this is just one
Yeah,
professor. So, I mean,
right.
I
Yeah,
don't know
sure. Yeah,
how much
that's
like the
that's great.
academic community agrees with that, but that was his perspective on uh,
There
what's
are
going on.
there are authors who are very anti UChicago, and especially the Chicago
Mhm.
Boys Club, they call it. I don't know how
Yeah,
much you read about the economists who
I
destroyed the
think
world.
within the economics department, people keep on talking about like Chicago economists and how they're pretty notorious and controversial. And I
Right,
mean,
right.
like the Chicago School of Economics, I think from what I've kind of heard from professors and students and all, I mean, obviously as an undergrad, you don't really get involved in that kind of stuff. But what I've seen and heard is that it's a pretty notorious group of people.
That's what they've been labeled as. In fact, most
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the very liberal investigative journalists have
Mhm.
bashed
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chicago
I mean,
economists
they're
from
known to be
time.
very like free market and
Mhm.
capitalism and things like that. So I think, and which in today's kind of public discourse is a very, especially in the US, is a very controversial and contentious discussion.
How's the UChicago campus taking the second, not pandemic, but the chaos
Mhm.
which has been unleashed due to uh, police brutality?
Yeah.
And do you
So I
see
think,
that Chicago being such a multicultural place? Do you see that in your face a lot?
mhm. So I mean, obviously not as much as I would have in a usual kind of setup because nobody was on camp, or most students weren't on campus while everything was happening, and it still is happening, I suppose. But I think Chicago is a like it's a fairly politically active uh, campus, and people are pretty vocal about their views, and there are good discussions. So students were very involved. There were like marches and things on campus for whoever was there. And generally, I think Chicago is I would it's probably not like among the most politically active in the country. I'm not sure as far as I know, but it is pretty politically active. And even in this case, they were which is which is a good thing. I think overall, it's a good thing that as a student there, if you're kind of if you want to get involved in these causes, you can. And there are movements, there are people, there are organizations that you can kind of use to have a voice in them. Uh,
Makes sense. But do you see that the student body is kind of half and half, or it's very, very
no, no, I
left?
think as you would expect in a college campus, it's
Yeah.
very like leaning towards one direction, and So I think one big debate in Chicago is that Chicago often talks about free speech and they're against like safe spaces and things like that. And uh, the administration tries to bring about a lot of kind of uh, they don't want the discourse to be completely one-sided, and they try and kind of uh, they claim that they try to foster conditions that can lead to really good quality discourse, but the kind of discourse that has opinions from all sides. And I think that's a very good thing. Some people disagree with that. Some people don't think that there really is a need to bring in other opinions where there are none. But I think there are other opinions. I think that I guess the one criticism I would offer kind of the general college climate and politics and things, not only in Chicago but in the US, but across the world, even in India, is that discussions often get very one-sided and uh, very often, I mean, and not always, and this doesn't go against the kind of good causes that people support, but like very often people aren't open to other views, and I think that's something I've seen across the world. So I wouldn't say it's a problem in Chicago in particular. It's a problem like among discussions on campuses across the world.
Interesting. So let's take our discussion and conversation to another sort of level. So switching gears, going to ask you a few rapid fire questions. The first
Okay,
one,
sure,
if you
sure.
were to look at, you were very busy this last quarter, so obviously the 2-3 months of lockdown might have impacted you minimally, I think.
Mhm.
But being at home instead of being on campus would have changed things. But what are the things you've reflected on during this lockdown? Uh, how have you thought of self improvement, doing something for your mind,
Mhm.
body, and soul? So yeah, anything that comes
That's a
to
good
mind.
question. I think so. So one thing that I've kind of thought about, been thinking about a lot. I don't know if it's exactly an answer to what you're saying, but is that I've been thinking about how much in-person interaction really affects education and the experience that a person has, like in college or in any learning environment, and how useful online tools can be. And so one thing I've been thinking about is whether colleges will kind of make more of an effort to integrate these online tools into their uh, kind of pedagogy even after all of this is done. So this isn't exactly like for self-improvement, but I
Sure.
think that's something I've been kind of thinking about a lot. But I guess to answer the question more specifically, I think I've also realized that I guess for general like learning and stuff, it really helps to kind of be around people who are doing the same thing. So, for example, that usually you have the entire community of people, like you have people, I guess, in the library studying together, or you have like you work on things with people in person, and so I've understood the value of those kind of interactions more in this time.
Interesting. Next question is about identifying and talking about your own strengths. It should be easy, I guess, but
Mhm.
let's go with it. If you were to pick 3 words which are adjectives that describe your strengths, which words would you pick?
Sorry, I think you cut out for a second. I didn't get the
Yeah, yeah. So if you were to pick
last.
3 adjectives to describe your strengths,
Mhm.
which 3 words would you pick?
Mhm. Uh, I'm trying to think of something that's not very cliched, but uh, I think one thing that I've realized is a kind of strength of mine is that it's not an adjective, but I think I have a like a can-do attitude. So I like taking on challenges, and I mean, obviously within reasonable kind of like measure, but uh, I, rather than kind of getting afraid of challenges, I kind of want to take them on and want to do things that I don't know if I can do. So I would say having that can-do attitude is one of them. I think I am hardworking when it comes to things that I want to kind of like do and things like challenges I'm looking to do. And what's the third? Let's think. I think I also, and this is something I'm not sure if I really like. I've seen that a bit, but I want to improve on it. Is creativity. So I think creativity. I've realized that is very important, and like even in things like academics and things like research and things like even areas you more associate as black and white and without much scope for kind of creativity or uh, a different kind of thinking. But I think through my experience in my classes or in the research I've been involved in, I've seen that creativity is something that's actually very important in these things. And I've seen some of it in myself, but I also want to work on it more.
Okay, that's fascinating. Quite honest and yeah, quite accurate if I little I know of you. So, uh, gonna end with advice you would give high school students who are applying to
Mhm.
colleges, especially, and also look at from the UChicago perspective.
Yeah.
What do you think worked in your high school journey and finally choosing the right sort of college list and finally applying? What within the application you felt most challenged to sort of work on, and what tips would you give as a reflection now having completed 2 years at college?
So, I mean, a few things that immediately come to mind, a few I think more straightforward and uh, simple things people should keep in mind. I think people like thinking about the US in specific, people often undermine the importance of doing well in like academics in school. And they think that the US kind of has this holistic process, so they look at a lot of extracurriculars and things like that, which is true. I mean, they look at a lot of things, but like I would say that your academic profile is still the most important component of the application. So I think if someone really wants to go to like the college that they aspire to go to and is trying to find all these different little extracurriculars to fit in, I think uh, I mean that's good. I think people should do that, but none of that should come at the cost of academics and academic performance in school and things like that. And I think academics is still a very is the most important component of the application is what I can tell. I mean, based on my limited knowledge, I'm sure that you have more experience and like more seen more applications, but I think academics is often understated the importance of academics. So I think that's one thing I would say in the
So, what do you
application.
think worked for you? I mean, other than putting your best in
Mhm.
terms of academics. Um,
So I think you have to. I don't think I tried to fit in any extracurricular for like the sake of it. So I didn't just pick up things that I could find. So I tried to think of the few things that I really wanted to do, and and I just focused on those things rather than kind of try and increase the number of things I had or try and really make it look like I'd done more than I actually had. And so I mean, for example, one thing I worked on was the paper for this journal called the Concord Review, and I spent a lot of months on that. So I mean, like often I see people doing things for 2 weeks and going on to another thing, going on to another thing because they want to kind of increase the number of things that they're doing. But I spent like several months in just this one paper, and I think it did make my application much stronger because in the end, it did get accepted to the journal, and it really looked like something I'd worked hard on, something that had come out well. So I think I would focus on kind of these larger projects that take time but really are worthwhile in the end.
so, I think, yeah, likewise, I would agree. Showing depth, or rather, figuring out what you really like to
Mhm.
do and being just honest and genuine and authentic in your application is
Yeah.
what works. Uh, the other thing about Chicago essays, and of course, once
Mhm.
you are there, you have another perspective as to why they ask you
Yeah.
these extra, very, very strange prompts. But
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
your take on the UChicago
Mhm.
essay, and why do you think they have strange prompts?
Uh, as for why they have those prompts, I'm not really sure because I think it's just a part of the culture there. I mean, they really pride themselves on their kind of strange essay prompts, and they call it the uncommon essay. And I think it's just that it's just part of the culture there. It's just part of the things they pride themselves on. They want to see this kind of out of the box thinking, but also they really want to see what you can make of the prompt. So I think people will often try and find out what they mean by the prompt, but like I think in reality they don't mean anything by the prompt. It's just like what you can make of it. And the way they come up with these prompts is that they ask students every year, like each year they send out this Google form that if you have some prompt ideas, and so people send their own submissions for their ideas and they pick a few. But I think for students who submit their ideas for these prompts, the admissions office doesn't ask them for the interpretation of it. So there really is no interpretation at all of the prompts that they give to you. So it's really what you make of it. And it doesn't even matter if the essay isn't like exactly on the prompt. I think my essay wasn't like it didn't answer the prompt particularly, but it just took the prompt as like a starting point and it built from that and things like that. So I think it's just they just really want to see how you can interpret the prompt. There's really no intended interpretation behind it. They themselves don't know what the prompt really means. Like it's up to you what it
Well
means.
said. Yeah, it's one of those googly questions in an
And I
interview.
think so. I think
Just be
rather
a
than being so, people often get like intimidated by this essay, but I think it's probably the easiest essay to write because you can just do whatever you want in the essay. I mean, there's no word limit and there's no constraints. You can put pictures. You can do whatever you want. So it's in that way is the easiest essay to write because often there are these other like common topics like I guess you have the major essay. You have like why this college and see. So in that case, you'll have like a template and a very kind of structured view of what should go in the essay. But in this case, there's really there's nothing that has to be in the essay. There's no particular way the essay has to be. So this should be the easy in a way. Like it's also challenging in a way because you want to put out something very good, but it's also easy because there's basically nothing you have to know before. You can just write whatever you want and however you want, and it should be the most fun essay you write. For me, it was definitely a lot of fun to write because there were no constraints at all on it.
wonderful. It was great chatting with you,
Yeah,
Tanmay,
it's
and
great to be on.
looking forward to engaging more during this summer. We have a
Absolutely,
few
yeah.
panels coming up. We're
Hmm.
trying to do a few mashups where
Hmm.
math econ student could connect with an artist to do
Sure,
a
yeah, yeah.
conversation and all of
Hmm.
that. So
Sounds
keep you
good.
posted on that. Thanks then.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.